There comes a moment in every relationship when words stop matching reality. You hear, "I love you," but it no longer feels like love. The tone is colder, the eyes avoid contact, and the gestures once filled with tenderness become mechanical, almost rehearsed. You start doubting yourself, wondering if you've become paranoid, too sensitive, or simply demanding. But deep down, something in your body already knows. Love that must be constantly proven through words is usually the one that's dying. Before we continue, remember to subscribe, share, and comment, not just for this channel, but to help spread these reflections to other men and women who might be trapped in the same illusion, needing to hear this truth before it's too late. We often think love is defined by what someone says. Society trains us to believe in words, the vows, the promises, the sweet affirmations that echo louder than silence. Yet love, the real kind, doesn't need to announce itself. It reveals itself in the smallest details, in presence, in attention, in the quiet effort to understand. When those things vanish, the words become nothing more than echoes of what once was. The tragedy isn't that someone stopped loving you. It's that you kept believing their words even after their actions had already said goodbye. People cling to words because they are easier to bear than the emptiness of truth. "He said he loves me" becomes a shield against the unbearable thought that maybe he doesn't. But love doesn't fade overnight. It erodes silently through neglect, disinterest, and distance disguised as busyness. And when that erosion becomes too visible, the phrase "I love you" turns into a cover-up, a way to quiet your intuition. This video isn't about bitterness or revenge, it's about clarity. Because recognizing when love has left is not an act of despair, it's an act of awakening. It's the moment when illusion collapses and you stand before the raw, unpolished truth of your connection. And though it hurts, that's where freedom begins. Today, we'll explore the hidden signs that reveal when someone no longer loves you, no matter what they say. Not to accuse, but to help you see, so you can finally stop mistaking words for love and start trusting what your soul already knows. The first sign is absence disguised as presence. He's there, physically, but not truly with you. His eyes drift elsewhere, his replies grow shorter, and when you speak, he listens with the kind of silence that feels like distance, not peace. You sense it when he hugs you without warmth, or when his hand, once protective, now feels heavy and indifferent. He hasn't left, not yet, but something inside him already has. You may tell yourself that all relationships go through phases, that work or stress is to blame. Yet if love still lived there, you would feel it in his effort to reach for you, even through exhaustion. When love remains, it fights to stay close. When it dies, it quietly watches you drift away. The second sign is the loss of curiosity. Once, he wanted to know your thoughts, your fears, your strange habits. He was fascinated by the way you saw the world. Now, he doesn't ask. He doesn't wonder. He assumes he already knows you. Or worse, he's stopped caring to. This is how love dies. Not through arguments or betrayal, but through indifference. When someone loves you, they keep rediscovering you. They look for your mind as much as your body, but when they stop looking, you begin to feel invisible, as if you become a background character in the story of your own relationship. And the cruel irony is that he may still say, "I love you," but what he really means is, "I love who you were when I was still paying attention." The third sign is emotional silence. It's not that he doesn't speak, it's that his words no longer carry feeling. You can sense when someone's heart has gone quiet. The jokes feel rehearsed, the apologies shallow, the affection strategic. He speaks of love as if reciting a duty rather than living an emotion. It's a silence made of noise, where every phrase hides avoidance, every reassurance hides guilt. And yet you keep listening, hoping that somewhere beneath his voice, the man you once knew will reappear. But silence like this doesn't lie. It reveals. Because when someone loves you, even their silence is alive. When they don't, even their words are dead. The truth behind these signs isn't cruel, it's liberating. Because once you stop chasing words, you start listening to reality. You begin to see that love is not something that can be declared. It's something that is done moment by moment through honesty, attention, and presence. And when those are gone, you're not being loved. You're being kept. There's a difference. One feeds your soul, the other feeds someone's comfort. Understanding this difference is the first step toward freedom, and though painful, it's the only path that leads you back to yourself. The fourth sign is when you start feeling guilty for asking for love. You notice how you begin to apologize for wanting closeness, for desiring affection, for expecting consistency. You shrink your needs, make them smaller, more acceptable, until one day you stop asking altogether. This is what happens when love becomes one-sided. You start negotiating for crumbs and calling it peace. He may still say he loves you, but his love now has conditions. It only exists when you don't disturb his comfort, when you don't question his detachment, when you fit neatly inside his silence. You become careful, measured, always walking on emotional eggshells, afraid that your longing will make him retreat even more. And yet, the more you suppress yourself to preserve the relationship, the more the relationship dies, because true love cannot breathe where one of you has to disappear to keep it alive. In the beginning, love is effortless. Two people meet and everything flows. But what sustains love isn't just the thrill of the new, it's the courage to keep showing up when it's inconvenient. The man who truly loves you doesn't punish you for wanting connection. He finds a way to meet you there. When he doesn't, when every honest conversation turns into tension, when every emotional need feels like a burden, it's not love you're fighting for, it's validation. And validation is the ghost of love. It looks like it, sounds like it, but lacks the soul that gives love its light. You can spend years chasing that ghost, mistaking emotional survival for intimacy, but deep down, you'll always know the difference. The fifth sign is disrespect masked as honesty. There's a form of cruelty that hides behind the excuse of just being truthful. He begins to use truth as a weapon, not as a bridge. You'll notice it in subtle ways, small dismissals, mocking your emotions, calling you too sensitive whenever you express pain. At first you think it's you. You think you've become fragile, overreactive, unreasonable. But real love never humiliates. Real love corrects with kindness, disagrees with care, and speaks with the intent to heal, not to dominate. When a man starts using honesty to diminish you, what he's really saying is that he's stopped seeing you as someone he must protect. And that's when love has already ended, not always with betrayal, but with the quiet erosion of respect. This is the part few people talk about, that love doesn't always end in explosion. Sometimes it ends in stillness, a stillness so subtle that it can take years to recognize. You wake up beside someone and realize that while you've been holding on, he's been letting go. You've been trying to repair something that only exists in memory. And it's in that silence, that in-between of what was and what remains, that you're invited to awaken. Because love may fade, but awareness doesn't. And once awareness enters, it demands truth. It asks you to look without filters, without excuses, without fear. This realization can break you, but it can also rebuild you. When you stop believing in false love, you begin to learn real self-respect. When you stop chasing words, you start feeling your own worth again. You begin to see that love is not something you must earn or beg for. It's something you embody. You become the space where truth lives, even if it costs you the illusion of being loved. And though you may walk away feeling empty at first, that emptiness is sacred. It's the clearing where real love, not borrowed, not spoken, but lived, can finally find you. What most people don't realize is that when someone stops loving you, the energy between you doesn't simply vanish. It transforms. At first, it becomes tension. You sense it in the silence between conversations, in the way small disagreements suddenly turn into cold wars. You tell yourself it's stress, or that all couples go through this. But the truth is, you can feel when someone's heart is no longer synchronized with yours. You can sense when love has been replaced by endurance, when he's staying, not because he wants to, but because leaving would be inconvenient. This is one of the cruelest forms of emotional deception, staying out of habit while pretending it's devotion. His presence becomes an illusion, a performance, and you start living with the ghost of what you once had. The human mind resists loss with everything it has. It would rather hold on to lies than face emptiness. That's why many stay in relationships that have already ended. The words, "I love you," become an anchor to a sinking ship. You cling to them because they still sound familiar, and familiarity feels safe even when it hurts. You replay the old moments, the laughter, the tenderness, the warmth, hoping that remembering will revive what's gone. But love doesn't return through memory. It only grows through presence. And when presence dies, you must face the truth that love isn't supposed to feel like anxiety, confusion, or begging. It's supposed to bring peace, even in conflict. The irony is that sometimes the person who says, "I love you," most often is the one who fears you'll finally see the absence behind those words. When love is real, it doesn't need constant reassurance. It simply is. It breathes through action, through honesty, through the effort to understand even when it's hard. But when someone's love fades, they use words like bandages to cover wounds they don't want to face. The "I love you" becomes a script repeated at the right moments, after a fight, before sleeping, when you're on the verge of breaking down. And though the words are familiar, they now feel hollow, because what you're hearing is not love. It's control. It's the attempt to keep you close while giving you nothing of substance. This is where most people mistake pain for proof. They think, if it hurts this much, it must mean I care deeply. But real love doesn't require suffering to be real. Suffering often begins when we start loving someone's potential instead of their reality. When you love what a person could be, you start ignoring what they are. You build illusions around their good moments and call them signs of hope. Yet true love is not built on exceptions, it's built on consistency. It's not the occasional warmth that defines love. It's the everyday respect, the small gestures that whisper, "You matter." When those vanish, the relationship becomes a performance where you play the role of the believer and he plays the role of the lover, both afraid to stop acting because the silence that follows might reveal the truth neither wants to face. But that silence, painful as it is where awakening begins. The end of false love isn't tragedy, it's clarity. It's the moment when illusion collapses and you see what was always there, that love can't survive without honesty, and you can't thrive without self-respect. When you stop listening to empty words and start observing reality, you stop being the one who waits and become the one who understands. That understanding may cost you the comfort of illusion, but it gives you something infinitely more precious, the peace of living in truth. When you begin to live in truth, the world around you starts to shift in quiet but profound ways. People may say you've changed, that you've become cold, distant, or proud. But what they're really seeing is a man or woman who no longer seeks validation through illusion. Before, you were always adjusting yourself to keep someone else comfortable. You would hold your tongue, hide your disappointment, forgive too quickly, and pretend that small gestures meant more than they did. You did it out of love or what you thought was love. But once awareness enters, you can't go back. You start seeing the imbalance for what it is, a cycle where you gave and the other only took. And for the first time, you begin to question not why they stopped loving you, but why you kept accepting so little from them. This realization is painful, yet it's sacred, because the moment you stop chasing proof, you reclaim your power. You no longer need him to say, "I love you," for you to know your worth. You stop searching for affection in gestures that were never meant to hold you. You understand that silence, when born from clarity, is stronger than any promise born from fear. When you stop believing in hollow love, you stop fearing loneliness, and that is when true peace begins. The love you start to cultivate isn't the desperate kind that begs to be seen. It's the kind that simply is, whether someone else recognizes it or not. And here's where life becomes beautifully paradoxical. The moment you stop trying to hold on, people begin to see your value. The man who once dismissed your needs might start wondering what happened. Friends who pitied you begin to look at you differently. They sense something new, not arrogance, but calm. You've stopped trying to control outcomes. You've stopped explaining yourself. You've stopped confusing being needed with being loved. And this serenity unsettles those still living in illusion. Because peace in a world addicted to validation always looks like rebellion. But don't mistake detachment for bitterness. True detachment doesn't come from hate, it comes from clarity. You no longer need to punish or expose anyone. You simply see things as they are and act accordingly. You let go not because you stopped caring, but because you finally understand that real love cannot be built on pretense. To love someone who doesn't love you back is not noble, it's self-abandonment. Real nobility lies in having the courage to walk away from the counterfeit even when your heart still longs for it. In that act of walking away, something miraculous happens. The same silence that once terrified you becomes your refuge. The solitude that once felt like punishment becomes the ground of your rebirth. You start hearing your own voice again, not drowned by someone else's noise. You remember what it feels like to wake up without anxiety, to breathe without waiting for a message, to exist without fear of indifference. And as this peace grows inside you, you realize that love was never supposed to chain you. It was meant to make you whole. The words, "I love you," may have lost their meaning in his mouth, but they begin to find meaning again in yours, as you learn to speak them first to yourself. When you reach this point of awareness, something profound unfolds. You begin to see love not as a promise, but as a presence. You stop asking, "Does he love me?" and start asking, "Does this connection bring truth, peace, and growth into my life?" The answer often comes in silence, but it's a silence full of clarity. You realize that love, in its truest form, doesn't demand constant reassurance. It doesn't leave you questioning your worth, nor does it keep you small so someone else can feel large. Love is a force that liberates, not one that confines. It's not meant to keep you hoping for a version of him that no longer exists. It's meant to align you with your own essence, to remind you that the heart's deepest function is not to cling, but to recognize. The transformation that follows can be uncomfortable, because freedom always begins as loss. You may grieve the man he once was, or the version of yourself that tried to save him. You'll revisit the moments when he said, "I love you," and realize that sometimes he meant it, but only with the part of himself that was capable of love at that time, a love too fragile to grow, too afraid to stay. And though that realization stings, it also frees you from resentment. You begin to understand that people love to the level of their consciousness. Some can only love with their ego, others with their wounds, and only a few with their soul. Once you see that, you no longer take their lack of love as proof that you are unworthy. You see it simply as evidence that they are unready. As this wisdom takes root, you stop romanticizing suffering. You no longer confuse attachment with connection or loyalty with self-betrayal. You see that love cannot coexist with fear, the fear of being alone, the fear of not being chosen, the fear of not being enough. Those fears were the real chains all along, and when they dissolve, the space they once occupied fills with something infinitely quieter but more powerful: self-respect. You start protecting your energy, not out of pride, but out of understanding that your peace is sacred. The same heart that once begged to be understood now beats calmly, even in solitude. And then something unexpected happens. Life begins to mirror your inner state. You attract people who value what you value, who speak through presence instead of promises. You no longer chase love, you embody it. You begin to meet souls who don't have to say, "I love you," for you to feel it, because their actions already whisper it. And you start to see that the absence of false love was never a curse. It was the clearing where real love could finally find you. This is the paradox of awakening. What once broke you is now what grounds you. What once made you feel abandoned now teaches you self-belonging. You no longer need to hear the words, "I love you," to believe in love, because you've learned that truth doesn't need to be declared. It reveals itself in how life begins to flow when you stop living in illusion. You no longer wait to be chosen because you finally understand. The moment you chose yourself, love began again. In the end, you see the paradox clearly, that what once felt like rejection was, in truth, redirection. You were never being punished by his absence. You were being invited to return to yourself. The same silence that once frightened you has become your teacher. The same emptiness that once felt unbearable is now where peace lives. You begin to understand that love isn't something someone gives or takes away. It's something that awakens inside you when illusion dies. What once looked like isolation was actually clarity. What seemed like weakness, letting go, walking away, staying silent, was strength. And what once appeared as loss was liberation in disguise. You stop needing closure, explanations, or apologies. You realize that love's ending doesn't require someone else's permission for you to heal. You no longer wait for him to recognize what he lost, because that's not your story anymore. Your story is about awakening, about stepping out of the fog of confusion and into the simplicity of truth. It's about learning that love, at its purest, is never meant to be begged for, proven, or defended. It either flows naturally or it doesn't flow at all. And once you've seen that, you can never again settle for less. You become allergic to pretense, to empty words, to comfort without connection. You've outgrown illusions that once felt like home. In this clarity, you may find yourself smiling at the very memories that used to hurt, not because they've lost meaning, but because you've transformed. Pain has become wisdom, and wisdom has become peace. You no longer resent the man who said, "I love you," without meaning it. You thank him silently, because through his falseness, you discovered the value of truth. Through his absence, you met your own presence. Through his silence, you found your voice. You are not broken, nor are you bitter. You are simply awake. So let this be your reminder. You don't need someone else's love to feel whole. The love you've been seeking was never meant to be found in someone else's hands. It lives within you, quietly, patiently, waiting for you to notice it again. And when you live from that space, calm, grounded, unafraid, you stop chasing and start attracting. You stop proving and start being. That's when love, real love, begins to move toward you effortlessly because you've finally aligned with its truth. If this reflection spoke to something deep within you, remember to subscribe for more content like this, to share it with someone who may need to hear these words today, and to leave a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Every voice, every reflection adds light to this space, a space for all of us who are learning that sometimes losing love is the very beginning of finding ourselves.